All right, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have my friend, mentor, and sponsor, Soranie, on the show. Welcome, Soranie.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited. You have no idea. So
By the way,
Soranie is she's a sober bartender as well. And one of the reasons that when she first, shared parts of her story, I like instantly felt drawn to her because not a lot of people get being sober and still continuing to be a bartender. So that was like one of the first things that really drew me to her. And so she's going to share some of her story, what it was like, what it's like now, and what it's like being a bartender. So
sure.
Soranie, yeah,
Take it away.
take it
Right
away.
on. Yeah, the highlights for me are, I started drinking around 5, was drinking regularly by 13, was using drugs by 14. Um, it was for me, it was a medicine, right? Like I didn't like the way I felt. And when I used or drank, like I didn't feel the way I didn't want to feel anymore. So, um, when I started working in restaurants, bartender became an opportunity for me. And when I moved into it, I was already drinking pretty heavily and struggling with it. And I found that like bartending, it was a lot easier to drink. People like to buy bartenders drinks while they're
Mhm.
bartending. And like it took a little bit of the edge off for me. So I like really dug into it because it helped feed my problem. And like that's kind of a curse, right? But it's also kind of a blessing because it pushed me far enough into my alcoholism that I had to get sober. And once I did, I realized that the alcohol wasn't the only part of bartending I loved, right? Like I had also gained all these skills, and like once I had a little bit of sobriety under my belt, those skills are still valuable, right? Like I could be an awesome bartender, I could get along with my customers, I could, give really good recommendations because I have a wicked drinking history, and they appreciate it, right? Like I enjoy the nuances now, which is really cool. So
And we definitely have the gift of multitasking people don't realize. Like I've really discounted myself. It's my alarm to call you.
that's great.
um
Right on
so
time.
yeah, my but like multitask, like being able to manage well so many tasks at the same time. And like I
Mhm.
did that I don't want to say nearly unconscious, but like being bartenders that drank on the job, like,
Yep,
I could do all those things with my eyes closed.
absolutely. And, like, think about it now, like, what I like, it's muscle memory, right? Like,
Mhm.
I feel like when you make those same motions over and over again, you learn how to do it without thinking. So now that I'm not drinking, it's, like, twice as fast, and I'm, like,
Mhm.
twice as good at it, and in my mind, I'm not, but, like, everyone else is like, "Why are you moving so quickly?"
Yes.
Because I'm not drinking.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I did um I did want to ask, like, because I forget quite a bit because things are so good now.
Yeah.
What was it like going back to work when you were newly sober?
Okay, so what I did when I got newly sober is I took like a 3-month break from bartending and I served, right?
Mhm.
And what I like, I was really afraid, but I figured out after like a month of it that like alcohol, like being around alcohol was no longer like the problem. Like when I was at work, I'm in work mode and like for some reason I didn't want to drink when I was working, but if you left me alone in that room while I was doing nothing, I had an instant urge. Or if you put me in a staff meeting for like 30 minutes, I had the instant urge because people, places, like they drive me nuts, but work isn't one of them, if that
Gotcha.
makes sense.
It does. And
Okay.
I still struggle to like find I can't quite go back in my memory to what it was like
Mhm.
after detox, like
Sure.
checking out on a Friday and going back to work on a Monday.
Yeah, I think like for me, the hardest part was what to do after the shift, right? Like, because I was so used to like working and like even like I drank through my work, but it was more controlled, right? Because I'm working. And then like you get done and you get plastered.
You had a
And what
head
I
start.
did, like it's just like all of a sudden, like, oh, all bets are off. I'm off the clock, sit down with the customers, have a great time. Um, But like going through the shift itself, like after getting sober, wasn't so hard. It was the minute I got done, right? And for me, like the minute I got done, I had to go to a meeting, like, and that was my
Perfect.
end. So
So I know we've talked about this, but a lot of people are even have like anxiety about the grocery store. Like if I had that, I wasn't even willing to acknowledge it. Like in my mind, I was like, I'm getting out of detox. I still have to go to work. So I've got to just make this work. Like alcohol and me have to exist, but I can't put that into my body because it's all over for me after that. But can you address like the fear of the grocery store and like
sure, I
navigating the alcohol?
I massively had that fear.
Mhm.
Like, I remember the first time after I got out of treatment that I went to the grocery store, I brought someone with me. Second time, same thing. Third time, same thing. I think it took like a few months for me to be able to go by myself because my automatic place I go first is to the liquor area. Then I just started avoiding aisles and going the long way around. It took time for me. Um, took time and work and like, the program of like AANAHACA, it doesn't matter. Those steps like are what changed it for me. And it like helped me see that like it was my brain that was causing the problem. It wasn't the fact that alcohol was in the vicinity there because this is on my free time and not at work. And for some reason, they're two different things for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had lost the barrier between being off work and on work. Like it didn't matter even when I was at a place where it was absolutely forbidden. That just meant I absolutely couldn't get caught.
Sure.
So like even I moved to Washington and I relapsed and it was like 5 months and there was no drinking allowed whatsoever at the places that I worked in Washington. But I still like would do inventory and pour some into a cup as I'm reaching into a cooler because the cameras can't see me. And we were
Yep.
wearing masks because it was the pandemic. So,
Mhm.
I just had all these, the way alcoholism works. Like
Yep.
you rationalize and you justify all these little things and then you set up these systems to make it easier for you to drink.
Yep. It's funny. I always think about there was a point in like where I was in between bars and I was like working in this restaurant as a server, right? And I'd go into work and I'd need a drink. So what I started doing was buying like little flight bottles
Mm-hmm.
and like lining my pockets with them. But it got too expensive. So I bought this like tiny funnel on Amazon and I'd like refill the bottles at home, screw them off, put them in my pockets and walk and like go to work and be like, these 8 are going to keep me good for the next 6 hours. And a lot of times it wouldn't. So like I'd have to steal from the restaurant or walk over to the liquor store down the street during a smoke break,
Mm-hmm.
That's that's my rationalization. Like I can manage this myself and like I'm going to come up with a system because I'm a systematic person. So here's my system. This is how I'm going to control costs. This is how I'm going to control usage.
Brilliant.
Like none of it actually worked in the long run. Like, but in my mind, it was better than what I would have done otherwise.
Yeah. And
So,
I get it
mhm,
though. Like that's the thing about alcoholism is that makes sense to me.
yep.
When I was in California and living on my mom's couch, I worked 2 nights a week and mind you, I was 31 at this point.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mom. Um, I worked 2 nights um at a nightclub and I had to cocktail waitress because they didn't have any openings behind the bar. So I was
Mhm.
like, I would order an extra shot because I could carry it out onto the floor and I could do it in the hallway on my way out onto the patio. But then that got so expensive because I wasn't making any money because I would drink it before I left. So I started getting the little mini flight bottles at the liquor store down the street.
Mhm.
But then like I started getting sloppy with it and they were like finding the empties and like they could see them in my apron and like it was yeah. But I had my little system and that was what it took. Um that's what it took just from day to day. Like it made so much sense to just I lived off of liquor then though.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's and it's wild what we'll do to hide it too, right? Like I do remember working at as a bartender in Seattle at like a restaurant. It's like 3 restaurants connected, right?
Mhm.
And I get out of work and, I'd sit like I didn't even know I was trying to control like other people's perception of my drinking. But like I would sit and I'd be like, okay, I'm done. I'll have a Fernet and I'll have a beer. Right. And so like I'd hang out at the bar and be like, I need to go smoke. And I'd go outside and I'd rip shots off of a bottle that I kept out there and then come back in and be like, no, this is all I'm having, guys. Sorry. Cause like, and like I didn't comprehend that I was trying to control the perception and the narrative, but that's what I was doing. That's what my brain was doing without me having any like knowledge of it. It's crazy what our brains can do.
And once again, excuse me, I totally identify. I didn't necessarily do that, but it was just, I would hang out. Like I hung out at the place that I worked, or, I
Mhm.
had in Vegas, I had several places where I would go after work. And it's like, I didn't drink too crazy. I would have like a drink and a shot, and I would Fernet about it all day, every day, by the way. I like lived on Fernet for like 2 years.
Yep, living on Fernets or Ferraris. I don't know if you've ever had one of those.
I have not. I have not.
It's, Fernet and Campari put together.
Ah, yeah, no, we
Great
didn't
idea.
have Campari. But but I didn't drink when I was out in public the way I drank at home.
Mhm.
So like at home there was just, all like the wheels came off. Whereas when I was out, it was more so like social, and I didn't like people when I did like start reaching out like maybe a year and a half before I got sober, people would say to me all the time, like, you don't seem like you have a problem. But it's like they never saw me sober. Like
Yep.
sober me was like uncontrollably like shaking and in DTs and
Yep.
anxious and antisocial and couldn't hold a conversation and like it, yeah.
I can 100% identify with that because, like, I know before my first time going to treatment, which, like, God bless treatment,
Mm.
but I was like incredibly out of control. Like, if I wasn't drinking, I was shaking. When I tried getting sober, I was having seizures. And I remember going into treatment and coming back out, and my roommates being like, "Oh, we had no idea you had an alcohol problem."
Yeah.
And it's like, we live together, right? Like, I'm so good at putting on this false narrative that like you can't even tell that like I'm killing myself.
Mm.
Like, it's powerful, but
It is powerful. And what's crazy is now, like years away from the drink, how
mhm.
those things we still have to watch out for, because we're not doing it with alcohol, but we still try to hide things, bury things, because those are the things that, like, those are our what's the word I'm looking for?
Coping mechanisms.
They're like our coping, those are like our fail safes. Like that's what we automatically revert back to. And so if
Yep.
we don't stay active and we don't stay vigilant and we don't stay honest, like that's still what we go back to, but emotionally instead of just alcohol.
Well, 100% because like I said, alcohol was my medicine, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't like the way I feel, so I'm gonna find something that's gonna change the way I feel. It was alcohol, it was drugs, now it can be food. Food
Mm.
changes how I feel. Adrenaline changes how I feel. Like pain changes how I feel. Love changes how I feel. Like I find other things to replace it because like I don't like how I feel in general. And if I stop working the program that also fixes the way I feel, then I find something else to use.
Mhm.
And it's so quick and I don't even notice it until I'm so deep in it. And that's why it's great to have like, I have a sponsor who calls me out on it, and I have like women I work with like you where I get to watch you going through the same thing and it's like, oh shit, I'm doing that too.
Yeah.
Fuck. You know?
Yes, I do, because I
Yeah.
learned that too. Like I can talk to you and see what comes up, but then when I talk to women that I work with, I'm like, oh, I'm so right there, just with something else. And
Yep.
it's beautiful because it just keeps us on this path of growing and like learning and unraveling and unbecoming what we worked so hard to become.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like the ultimate definition of humility, right? Like
Mhm.
a lot of times people think humility means to be less than or to be small. But like humility to me means being right sized, right? Like not thinking I'm bigger or more powerful than I am, and also not putting myself down in the hole, right?
Yep.
And walking this program or like helping other people and seeing them in the same place as you keeps you right sized, right? We're not better than anyone. We're not less than anyone. We're like walking that same path, and that other person is that reminder, if that makes sense.
It makes so much sense. It makes all the sense because like in my drinking, I thought that I was so much better and so much, I was like this grandiose personality, but then also I had so much self-loathing and like, you know, no self-worth and no self-respect and no boundaries. And I was never just walking the walk. Like I was never just on the path. And so that like surrender and that humility, it, like you said, like keeps me right sized. Like it keeps
Yep.
me just open to like, who can I help? How can I help? And it's not so that I can be better than or because I'm less than. It's just because
Yep.
I have experience that can benefit others. Like I've been given the gift of this new
Yep.
life. And number one, I can't help but want to share that with anyone that has any interest in listening to or receiving it. And also like that's my duty and obligation. Like in order to keep this life, I need to continue to share it.
Yeah, it's funny when you're talking about that. I was thinking of like, that ego that you're talking about. Like I'm the same way, right? Like when I was drinking, I had this massive ego and I thought I was better than so many people, or that's what I like projected out to the world. But inside I was so miserable and I hated myself and I hated everything about me. So there's like this big gap between what the world sees and what I am like to myself. And I think that like getting sober kind of brought them towards the middle, right? So that they
Mhm.
became like, I'm not as high, but like also my perception is not as low. And like it's so valuable. And like you just mentioned as well, like you can talk to anybody, right? Like it doesn't matter whether you're an alcoholic or an addict, like any person, anywhere, any problem. Like one of the coolest things about getting sober is the way I get to problem solve today is applicable to anybody I talk to. And like that comes in handy at work a lot. Those people at the end of the night at the bar going through stuff. Like I get to use like these simple tools that were given to me and help other people. And it helps everybody. It doesn't matter what your issue is.
Yep.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. That's my big thing is like, yes, our steps, like our steps apply to alcohol, but powerless over alcohol, we've talked about, you can put in there people, places, things, ideas, institutions, like all of these things that come up, like there's a solution. And I don't want to say I wish more people had the same like desperation or like hope to like surrender to, a 12-step way of life, but there's the possibility for growth for everyone, not just addicts and alcoholics, is there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it a lot of times takes hopelessness, pain to motivate us to change.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like sometimes I like to replace like in the 12 steps the word like alcohol with life,
Mhm.
right? I'm powerless over life and my life is unmanageable, right? Like these are the steps to fix how we're powerless over life. Like
I love that.
because that's what it is. Like I'm powerless over everything except for myself.
But the good news is
There's
there's a solution.
a solution. Everybody can use it. Yeah, I know. It's like I wish I could take it and put it into a pill and just prescribe it to people. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
if you knew what I have, like you would want it too. Doesn't sound fun to you, but like it's so much better than what it was like before.
Like I was just talking to a friend who was had quit drinking, but didn't feel like she needed meetings or didn't feel like she needed a program, and just felt like she needed a break. And I've been there and I get it, and she knows enough about the program to make her own decision, right? um
Right.
but it just, I get so interested because the perception of what recovery is and like what work it takes, like it can seem like overwhelming or off-putting to people that aren't there. Like they're not willing to give themselves over to that, but they do see the benefit. Like they see the night and day in the people that they love that have.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for most people, like there has to be no option left,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To try something different, we have to be left without options. And if you feel like you still have some, you got to use them before you can get there. And like, and it's tough, right? You hear people who like get sober once and never drink again. And you hear people who go to treatment like 25 times and still like don't get sober, right? It's just a matter of like feeling like you're out of options. And like,
Yeah.
I feel very blessed that like my bottom was like where it was, right? Because that bottom isn't like set for everybody. Everyone's is different, right? It's just the point at which you stop digging. And like, I stopped digging here, and somebody might dig a little farther, but hopefully eventually they stop as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I say like it takes what it takes, but
Mm-hmm.
like what made the bottom that made me go to detox and like made me go to treatment was totally different than like the bottom that I
Yeah.
reached after going out, because my life got better. Like I couldn't understand, like when I was in detox and I had never been to a detox or, talked to anybody who had been to one. Hearing people's experiences where they're like, oh, it's my 5th time here, it's my 6th time here. And I'm like, that's fucking stupid. Like, what do you mean you had to come back? Because I'm cocky, right? And also fearful at the same time. Yeah.
Yep.
So I just couldn't get why would you go into treatment if you were just gonna drink again? Like that's how uneducated I was about about alcoholism and about my disease. And I had learned the hard way, as I do with most things.
Yeah, well, like you gotta also remember, like the alcohol's trying to keep you from learning that lesson,
Yeah.
right? Like there's a whole chemical component to all of this, right? And like once we're in it, like our brain, like somebody who doesn't drink probably would have understood why, but like you can't because alcohol doesn't want you to.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but it's like clinically proven that alcohol does what it can to keep you believing you need it.
Yeah.
So
Yep. It's interesting. Like I got treatment and didn't necessarily want recovery. And that's a big thing that I hear from people that kind of want to break or they want to take some time off, but they don't want recovery. And I'm like, what don't you want? Like, what don't you want about like your eyes opening and like, the sun shining? And I don't know, like
yeah.
I get it, but like you said, I just wish that I
Put
could
it in a pill.
put it in a pill, like package it in a way that people just could see the benefit of surrender. Like it's not a bad thing. You're surrendering the pain and the frustration and the control and the misery.
But I feel like sometimes I feel like though, like it's only as valuable as it is because of what we go through to get it, right?
Yeah.
So like if everybody wanted it, it wouldn't be as valuable. You have to really like fight to get it. And that's what we did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a fight for you. I remember you
Mm-hmm.
fought, you clawed your way through.
Yep.
And that's why it's so valuable to you now. So,
Yep. It was almost 2 years ago, and like right around this time, because my birthday's coming up.
mhm.
It was really difficult. And when I first got sober, um, like right away I found Soranie, and it was all God's grace, because she did not normally go to the club that I went to every day, and I was not willing to like branch out and try other places. But she had been up at my club one day, like you were at my club, you spoke, and I was like, oh, I would like to talk to her, but she seems very intimidating, and like I would have to actually put forth work. And my first sponsor was my friend, and everything was kind of rainbows and unicorns. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of like structure, and there wasn't structure. And I saw Sorani, and I think that it was before I went on a trip to Vegas. And I went
Mhm.
on a trip to Vegas with like 17 days sober, thinking I got this because I had had a year sober, almost a year sober before. And I drank and I hated it. And I was that person times 10. once
Mhm.
again. And so when I got back to Washington and I got back in a meeting and I told on myself, and then thank goodness God brought Soranie right back into that meeting. And that was when I like ran up and was like, I want it, let's do it, whatever
Yeah.
it is. Like,
How many days did you have?
I just don't know. I don't
I
know.
think it was short. I think it was like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that was definitely a blessing. Like I don't go to that club very often, and I'm glad I was, because it's been an honor working with you and being able to take you through it. And you were probably the most desperate person I've ever worked with, which is awesome.
I
It was
was the most,
amazing.
well, that's how I became so willing.
Yeah. Yeah, you needed a change, so we got you
and
right through it.
and like when we talk about it takes what it takes, like the fact that, there was so much shame in my relapse and like in leaving my program in Las Vegas 10 days before 1 year, and like
Mhm.
moving up to Washington and starting a relationship and knowing that it's toxic and all these things, like all these things were exactly what it took for me to get desperate.
Yeah.
Like all of those things. And that's just so true in God's world. Like we
Yeah.
get that free will, and at every turn there's the opportunity to turn to him or to turn towards our will and keep barreling towards the chaos.
Yeah, and that's the crazy great design. Like, a lot of people, like, I think it's interesting. I hear a lot of pushback on the whole God thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like I get that. For me, like I grew up super religious, loved God, great relationship until I got a little bit older, right? And realized like I'm super, super gay. And
Yeah.
God doesn't like gay people according to the church I grew up in, so I had to make a choice, right?
Yep.
And when I got sober, this whole God thing came up again, and I was super resentful about it. I didn't like that I was required to worship someone who didn't like me. And I heard it multiple times that, like, it doesn't have to be the same God. God can be anything you want. And it took so long for me to comprehend that, like for me at least, the God of my childhood was maybe the God that I have now, but the church was telling me what my God was saying versus me listening directly to my higher power, to my God.
Mm.
So, um, a lot of people get frustrated with the idea that like God has this great plan, but like what you were talking about, like God gives us choices. And if we say no, he says, okay. Right. And then we suffer and we suffer and we suffer until we
And it's
decide,
not a punishment. It's
no,
just our choices.
it's our choice. Every choice has a consequence, right? Either a good or a bad consequence. And
Mm-hmm.
like, if we say no, we suffer. And it's not like a punishment on us. It's a choice we made. And if we say yes, then we gain from it. And it's not a punishment or it's not a gift.
Right.
It's a consequence as well. I
Yeah.
mean, it is a gift, but it's also a positive consequence to the
Yep.
choice we made. So,
I totally agree. And I'm glad that you brought that up because like I talk about God freely.
yeah.
And I talk about God with um religious people. And I don't necessarily consider myself religious. But I don't ever feel the need to like differentiate my God between theirs. Like I don't need to say, oh, but like I don't know Jesus like you know Jesus. I'm like, I bet my God loves me just like your God, it's like
Yeah.
God is God to me. So whatever you believe, whatever you believe is okay with me. And I just know that there is a power greater than myself. Like I feel this loving energy that like surges through me. And like I know for a fact that the things that have come about in my life are not things that I could ever make happen. Like
Mhm.
on my own accord, I cannot continue to live without without taking a drink or without causing chaos or without, there are these things that happen by turning my will and my life over every day. I
Mhm.
guess that's the point I was trying to get to there. It's just you don't have to know what it is, you just have to know it's not you.
Well, absolutely. Like, it's funny because, like, a lot of times we talk about, like, especially in church, they'll talk about the God of our comprehension, right? Which the idea of comprehension means it means that we cannot comprehend all of it. You would just say God otherwise. So if my brain can't comprehend all of God, it means yours can't either. We could all be seeing different pieces of one great thing, right? All these religions might be other people. Like, I like to think of the Bible as like, it's like 40 dudes' comprehensions of God.
Sure.
Each, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, and like each religion, it's their comprehension, but like we can't get it all. Our brains are not powerful enough. We just got to believe it's bigger than us and we can't destroy it. And like, we all seem to. So let's just, allow each other the room to believe what we believe.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if it helps, it helps.
And that was one of the big things, my first time around. My first time in
Mm-hmm.
the program is I didn't I didn't really investigate or rework my understanding of what a higher power meant to me. So that
Right.
childhood God, like I grew up Mormon
Right.
until I was about 9. But I
Mm-hmm.
did have just this set idea that, you know, that Jesus wants me for a sunbeam to shine for him each day. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's ingrained in my head. We had a little dance in our chair. Um, yeah. But I knew that you were good or you were bad, and I knew I wasn't good. And whatever told me that in my head, I ran with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always felt like there was a God and that he was capable of loving and embracing and forgiving everyone except for me.
Right.
Because if he knew everything that I did, there's no way I was good enough for his love or salvation or so anyway, this time around I just let go of everything. I let go of like any barriers that I had. Like I let go of an idea. I don't know. Like I don't know if that's right. I don't care. Like whatever it is, like just here I am.
Yeah.
And that has grown into like the most beautiful, expansive relationship that I've ever experienced. So
Isn't that nice?
yeah.
Like, and like, I mean, for me, it's like constantly evolving.
Mhm.
I love that you mentioned personal God, right? Because that's how I feel now, right? Like I've got a piece of God that's only mine and like looks out for only me and works on only my problems, but it's a piece of a larger thing, right?
Yeah.
And like I don't need to necessarily understand it as long as I know it's there,
Yeah.
right? And like faith to me is like the fact that I'm going to step off this like cliff and believe that something is going to catch me on the other side, that there will be a step. And when I am willing to like take my reservations and throw them out and have that faith, great things come. But if I bring those reservations with me, that's when the struggle begins, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's we have to trust, right? And if I can't fully trust, like I don't reap the reward or the benefits from like having faith because it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the tough thing is we have to grow into that faith, and that just comes through time, and time takes time, and taking these steps, and that takes time.
Yep. And like the more we do this, the more we walk it every day, the less that faith becomes conditional,
Mhm.
right? Like it's no longer like I'm in a bad like 'cause when I first got sober, all of my faith only happened when things were bad, right? Like it was conditional. Things are awful in my life. God, I have faith you can fix it. I'm gonna put everything into this. And then things would get better, right? And then when it was good, I'd lay off that faith because I've got this, right?
Yeah.
So like the more we walk this, the more we continue in faith because like all the good stuff we got is because of the faith we had.
Yes.
So if we keep that faith, like it'll exponentially grow. And that's like a hard thing to do because like I'm human, right? Like I fall right back into the same patterns all the time. And the only thing I can hope for is that like the time between full faith moments gets shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
So there's also there's also the gratitude. Like gratitude is up there with like when I was newly sober, Soranie you had me do a 10-item gratitude list every morning. And now I pass that on to like women that I'm working with, and they think Like I thought, okay, this is to help me have a positive outlook. Like this is to help me, but that was also part of my faith, was just like, you know, recognizing that there were things that were happening in my life as I got farther away from the alcohol and
Mm-hmm.
like got more into the steps. Like these things are happening in my life and like I don't have control over them. They're just happening.
Yep.
Like that really led me to the faith without conditions. Like just
Yeah.
yeah.
Gratitudes are such a fun thing because, like, when we get sober, we're so low on dopamine that we can't help but focus on everything negative, right? Like drugs and alcohol cause dopamine surges in your brain, which trains your brain to make less dopamine. So it takes a while, right?
Mm.
So I'm naturally conditioned now to always see things negatively. And when I only see things negatively, I have a negative attitude. So like taking time to just write 10 things that are good, like even if it's like I saw a butterfly or like the sun rose today, like it helps train us to like look for the positive. And even if we only look for the positive in that moment, that little bit of positive brightens our day some.
That's a
It's
mustard seed.
huh?
It's a mustard seed of positivity that can only
Exactly.
grow.
Exactly. And like the more we do it, the better our days seem to be. No true explanation other than the idea that we accepted some warmth at some point in the day and it changed the outcome for the rest of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool. So
Yeah.
I still love gratitudes. And then like what's great is like for us, like that what I had you do, right? Like so I had you do 10 gratitudes in the morning and then end your day with your 5 accomplishments, right?
Yep.
5 things you did for your recovery. Um, you did those and you got familiar with doing those. And then when we worked through the steps, we replaced those with things that also bring you gratitude and show you what you've accomplished. And it grew and you grew from it, right?
Yeah. And continue to grow because it's on a
Yeah.
much deeper level because you're digging for these answers and you're, doing a personal inventory and looking at yourself and at your actions and at your thoughts and your feelings and
Yeah. It's crazy. And like for me, like that meditation in the morning, like that we replaced the gratitude list with, that was a hard thing for me personally. I was still at the point that I got to step 11, I was still struggling to consolidate my old ideas of what my higher power was and my new ideas of what my higher power was, not realizing they could be the same thing. So when you like believing in God wasn't hard, but asking me to listen to what God said was really complicated because the last time I listened to what God was saying was when a pastor told me that my homosexuality is a problem, right? So it was
Mhm.
really hard for me to get into it, but the pain got great enough, right? Like, and that's like that's how it works with me. Like when the pain is great enough, I surrender and I do what I'm supposed to do. And when I got given like a 30-day challenge, and when I did that 30-day challenge, my life and my energy like just shifted.
Mhm.
I got calmer and like as I did it, it got easier for me to just like listen and like realize that like I'm not necessarily listening for a voice in my head. I'm listening for the thoughts that are being given to me. And like in between times of presence, right? Like because they come in and out.
Mhm.
And journaling it also brought another layer to it, where like now, like as I'm writing these words, it's like God is working through me in a weird way. So it was a fight for me, whereas for you latched right on, but
I started by reading daily reflections every morning, and then I would
mhm,
kind of write how I identified with whatever the daily reflection was. And then
mhm,
you prompted me to kind of dig deeper and apply it more so to like what I was encountering in my life.
mhm,
Because yeah, at 2 months sober, I separated from my, from my uh,
yeah,
then husband. So the steps, the time that I was taking those steps was such a powerful time because I was in a life transition, not just with re-entering recovery, but also with ending this thing that was definitely not good for me.
yeah,
and learning how to like walk forward and do things in a loving way, like learning how to have boundaries, how to, approach things with love, patience, tolerance, and also how to not be a doormat, because I
Mm.
thought that, I felt so guilty over the things that I had done that I felt like I had to just be, I had to just take whatever was given my way because I still felt like I deserved that. And you kind of helped me learn that, like, no, I don't do harm, but I also don't have to take shit.
Absolutely. It was honestly, you had such an interesting first year of sobriety. But you walked it gracefully. You I feel like you were almost unaware of the actions that were being taken against you. And it wasn't until like I was like, hey, you can say no. Like, hey, you don't have to do that, that you started like recognizing it, right? And,
Yeah, because
I'm glad you did. And the step work did coincide for you
yeah,
with exactly what you were going through. Like all those coping skills and like the grace that you handled that situation with were directly reflected with where you were in your step work. And it was so cool.
yeah. I can't imagine. I mean, I can imagine what it would have been like had I not had a program, but
Yeah. What's so interesting is after you, the next woman I got through the steps was going through the exact same
yes.
situation.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know what you're doing here, God, but I mean, I'm here for it, right?
Yeah.
Like
You're
helping
like,
women.
oh, oddly enough, I've actually already experienced this with
Yep, done this
someone.
before with a sponsee. And so, like, it's probably good, the way God works is I get trained for situations and they keep getting handed to me, and I keep getting the chance to use the skills I've been given.
Hmm.
So, like, I'm thankful for the fact that we walked through that together because it helps other women. Like, your experience is constantly helping other women, and that's so fucking cool.
It really is.
Yeah,
Because when, now when I go through something, like there's that constant reminder of like, someday this is going to be an asset to someone else.
yeah,
And it doesn't make it better. And it's not like, I don't want to just paint everything with silver linings and not, and rose colored glasses and just like paint rainbows on everything. But it's like every single thing that has come my way that has felt like the end of the world or has felt too heavy to carry, I have completely survived. And now, like you said, with turning those things over to my higher power, like I can not only handle them, I can walk through them gracefully because I'm not carrying the burden by myself anymore. And
exactly.
then I have the, the knowledge and the reassurance that I'm going to encounter someone that is going to really benefit from this experience, and not just because I read about it or heard about it, but because I walked it.
Yeah, and what's cool is like the great thing about this fellowship is it like in sponsorship in the first place is that like we build lineages, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm your sponsor, I have a sponsor, my sponsor is a sponsor. And so like somewhere in this lineage, this like like this line of women, there is not a single situation that hasn't been dealt with. So like let's say I run into like working with someone, something that I've never dealt with, I can ask any of you for support and you can give it to me and you can also give it to my sponsee, right? Because
Yep.
like we're a people helping people fellowship.
Yep.
Like we're all here to help, and like um it means there's never something that no one knows how to deal with, right? And we get to watch each other walk through it, and we get to help each other walk through it, and that's a family.
It is.
Yeah, it's a family in a way a lot of people don't get to experience family, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's completely transparent,
Hmm.
and like the only goal is to help each other. Like there's no ulterior motives. We stand nothing to gain except to help each other.
Exactly. It's based on a shared experience, right?
Yep.
Like we've all been to the same place and we're all trying to go to the same place. So
Yep.
there's a lot of love there. A lot of love because we can understand one another in a way that um like I guess I don't want to say real families, but other families can't, right? Like my personal family, love them to death, right? but they can't understand what I've gone through. Not like you guys can.
Not on, yeah, the level of someone who's also walked it and walked out of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I'm excited that I get to sit down and like talk about it with you. I didn't know where our talk was going to go, but I'm not surprised that it went to higher power and faith and
Yeah, I'm part of the God Squad.
yeah, because this is the stuff we just kind of talk about, and we just get on these tyrants of like, once again, gratitude for like just how amazing our lives are now.
Yeah. Like, even, I know, and it's so cliche to say, but like the lowest low is still better than the highest high when I was using. Because I just wasn't, even when I was happy, I wasn't really happy. Right? I didn't
Yeah,
feel fulfilled.
no,
I didn't feel like presence. And like presence is like the biggest gift, right? Like, because I know now that when I am in fear, I am thinking of the future. And when I'm in pain, I'm focused on the past,
yeah,
right? Like, and this program gave me the opportunity to sit right here in this moment, which is what rockets us to the fourth dimension, as it says in the big book.
yeah,
So, yeah.
yep. And that's one of the most powerful things. Like, that's one of my favorite tools is like when I start feeling any of those things to just focus on my breath and remember that I'm just a person sitting in a chair and I'm just existing. Like, I'm not fixing, I'm not solving, I'm not worrying. Like, if I'm just breathing, that's enough. And like that, yeah,
Like, but like that right there, that ability to stay present, that is the biggest skill in being a sober bartender now.
hmm,
Like, I don't know why. I just thought about that. I'm like, oh, wait. Because, like, when I'm in the weeds, when I'm getting my butt kicked, instead of spiraling out in my head, I'm staying present and I just keep moving, right?
yep,
And so then my attitude stays great. Like, my customers they're not blind. Like, they see it's busy. But in my head, I'm like, oh my God, they don't think I'm working hard enough,
yeah,
Unless I'm present.
yep,
And it's just like a great benefit to them and myself.
yep. And that's just one of those muscles that gets more and more natural the more we strengthen it. But
Absolutely.
it's still a work in
Absolutely.
progress. Progress, progress.
You're killing the game.
Oh,
You're
we
doing.
both are.
It's so funny now. Like, at the restaurant I bartend at, they do tastings every Thursday, and like my management still is just completely perplexed by the fact that I'm sober. Right? So they're like, "Oh, we'll pour these wines, and you can smell them." And I'm like, "I'm not going to smell them. Like, you just opened $140 bottle of wine so that I can smell it. Like, I'm good." Right? So, but like, I don't have to smell it today, and I don't have to taste it today. I can sit through that and be totally fine.
Yeah,
It's just it's wild. Being a sober bartender is like such a benefit.
it is.
Hmm.
And there's been a lot of days where I don't want to be a sober bartender anymore. I kept like I've gone through, and it's been years, like years and years of the back and forth. And like I feel pretty good about embracing it now. It's not, the job is not the problem. The alcohol isn't the problem unless I put it in my body. Um, but I'm glad that other people can drink with impunity. I'm glad that people can, it breaks my heart to see people who are drinking because they need to drink or because they're sick, but just the fact that drinking exists and people partake no longer offends me. Whereas at first I was very, very jealous. I felt like it wasn't fair that I couldn't drink. I mean, I could, but I couldn't drink without ruining my life.
Right.
And I don't feel that way. I know that I have the choice and that the choice that I make is much, much better and very much worth it. Like, there's nothing I'm missing out on.
Absolutely. I know that feeling. Like, I remember right when I first got sober, I was living in a sober living, and I remember commercials coming on and getting pissed off at beer commercials, like changing the channel and then like wanting to contact Comcast about how many beer commercials they had. I'm like, it's changed. Like, And it isn't like just time, right? It's spiritual fitness,
Yeah.
like we've been talking about. So like as long as I stay spiritually fit, like I'm gonna be fine. But the minute I lay off or take my foot off the gas, like all like I will walk backwards in my steps,
Mm.
and that'll lead me right back to believing like I'm powerful enough to handle a drink, which I'm not. Every time I do, I break out in handcuffs. So
Mhm. I always say, what's the point in one anyway?
yeah,
Because my alcoholic mind was a drink to blackout person, like,
yeah,
but yeah, like being spiritually fit, like makes that whole live and let live possible.
yep,
Whereas like I don't feel that way when I'm not spiritually fit. Like I'm not good with you doing you, and I have an idea about how you should be living and how you should be acting. And so once I'm right in myself and with, yeah, with where I'm at and what I'm doing, I'm okay with you, you know, as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, or at least not hurting others.
yeah. And like, I mean, I'll like, you know how it is here in Washington. Like, if I let someone get super intoxicated and they walk out the door and they get in a car and they kill somebody, it's on me,
That's
right?
Texas as
So
well.
yeah, so like, I'm glad that I have like the ability to see what's happening around me today, so I can
Mhm.
cut people off and prevent that, right?
Yep.
So I'm not going to jail, but I also don't want to like let someone get so far off that like they do hurt someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also like there's the aspect like there's so many customers. I mean, you work more in a restaurant setting and I'm more in like a dive or like a local bar setting. But
Yeah.
over the years, there's been so many customers that have been sober curious, you know, and I feel like we're a safe place because it's like a non-judgmental person. Like clearly it's okay if you drink because I'm the bartender, I'm serving you. But
Yep.
then it's like they can come and they can ask those questions and, you know, kind of get a little glimpse, a dip, you know, dipping their toe and hopefully getting a mustard seed of,
Yeah. Well, like I mean, that's it's not even just at work, right? It's like in life in general. Like I personally like I'm very honest and open about my sobriety. I post it on my like Facebook, like, you know, I'll talk about it with anyone who wants to, and people will reach out, right?
Mhm.
Like because you're making yourself available, and like that's a beautiful part of the program is like we're supposed to stay open and we're supposed to help others where we feel comfortable. So the more open I make myself, the more likely I am to have someone reach out,
Yeah.
right? Because like I can't like be like, oh, you have a problem, let me take you where you need to go. Like I need to hear you say like, hey, I need help.
Oh yeah.
I can help you.
A lot of people ask me to judge their drinking. Like
Hmm.
I'm some kind of like deciding factor on whether or not you're an alcoholic. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like there's no judge, jury, and executioner. Like if you want to take a real drink, look at your drinking, like we can sit
Yeah,
down and talk. But
I had to explain, like I explained my alcoholism to my one of my managers yesterday. He was like asking questions about it, and I had to explain like the difference between me and like I'm an abnormal drinker. You might be a normal drinker. You can have two drinks and walk away. Like the minute alcohol touches my lips, my allergy kicks in. My brain starts going crazy thinking about how I can get more, and my body will, if there's anything around me, I physically need it and I will take it. Like
yeah.
that is the big difference, right? I like I imagine in my mind, like, you know, there's a genetic component, and I think I have it.
Mm.
And it's like I was built with a light switch inside of me. And if I had drank normally and not gotten to a certain point, that switch might have never flipped, but I did flip it at some point.
Yeah.
There's no turning it off now.
I totally agree. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that analogy.
Yeah. It's stuck up forever. So no matter what I take, I'll go from 0 to 100 in 2.2 seconds.
Yeah.
So,
I always
yeah,
just try to describe to people like I was able to go periods of time without drinking before I couldn't anyway, but it's not about how long I can go without a drink, it's what I do once I get my hands on it.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah. So what do you feel today is the hardest part about being a sober bartender then?
um I would say it's still maintaining my spiritual fitness. It's still interacting with other people. I still run into situations where I don't like how I feel and I want to change how I feel.
Sure.
I know I don't want to change it with alcohol, but I definitely want to, like, I like future trip to the end of my shift, or I get on my phone to distract myself, like, because I don't like there's just something that'll come up that'll either like rub me the wrong way, or people are rowdy, or they're being obnoxious to me. Like if I'm annoyed, I'm the problem because I'm annoyed. Like if they're
Yeah.
just doing what so it's still people. And before I was part of the party, and I think the part about them doing that I don't like is that that's how I used to be. And now
Sure.
seeing it, like, I don't like to see people get like that because that was my MO. Like I was loud, I was boisterous, I was obnoxious, knock stuff over. And
Yeah.
so how about you?
I agree it's people, but like I think the biggest issue is prioritization, right? Like my priorities as a bartender have changed from when I was drinking, right? Like you said, like I love the camaraderie, so like people staying long, people like, things being a mess, like, focusing on like having a good time with the customer was much more important to me
Hmm.
versus now where I think like my focus is on making sure the customer's having a good time while I'm taking care of other stuff, right? And so I do get frustrated with people, especially like other coworkers who like don't have those same priorities, right? And that in itself is like my control piece, right? Because I'm not a part of that. Like I have a control problem and like I want to control the way this situation goes. And I can't control these other people. So like I feel like I'm picking up the slack. And so I have to constantly work on, letting go of the fact that like other people don't have the same priorities as me. Closing really quickly isn't necessarily a priority for them because they're having a really good time with those people. But for me, I want them to have a good time and I want to make sure I get my shit done.
Yeah,
So
I
yes.
totally, yes. Like I had like just these amazing connections with my customers because of the kind
Mhm.
of places that I worked in. So
Yeah.
like that was the most important, was like nurturing those relationships. And like the dishes can get done later, and like the food can get ran later. And
Yeah.
when I was drinking, and like now my priority is just efficiency. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to cut you off in a conversation to go do something, whereas before that would never happen. Like people can wait until we're done talking, and now I'm like, hold that thought, I've got to.
Yeah. And what's crazy is like I feel the exact same way, but like I still have the same relationships with my customers. Like I'm the bar lead at my bar and like I have customers who look for me every single time, even though like while I'm talking to them, I'm washing dishes or I'm putting things away. Like because people are a lot more understanding than I gave them credit for. And I wish
Mm,
other people saw it the same way. So
yeah. Yeah, it
yeah.
doesn't come without its own challenges, but I mean, being in recovery, the good thing that we learn is that our challenges are usually internal.
Yep.
Like a lot of times we don't need to change much on the outside, or if we do, like there's something that we need to address on the back end, but really like our troubles are of our own making.
100%.
So,
100%. Yeah, when I get that irritated, I 100% know that it's because I'm trying to force other people to be something they're not, right?
mhm,
Like I have no control over people, places, and things. So why don't I just focus on what's in my little hula hoop
yep,
and stay out of their way? If I want to close faster, I can do that while they do that.
yep,
Hmm.
yep. And I don't recommend becoming a sober bartender if you're newly sober, but if it's what you've already done, and if you're already a bartender and you're thinking about if you're feeling like you're at the end of your rope and you're ready, to give sobriety a try, if you're ready to seek help, like it's possible to still maintain your job and maintain relationships. Things change, but mostly it's inside you that's going to change. you know
Yep.
like life is going to life, but you can adjust yourself with help and guidance.
Absolutely. I think for me, I know that I had to take a step back from the bar for a couple of months because for me, recovery has to come first, right? So
Mhm.
I took a step back from the bar. I worked on like, getting my like 90 days sober, and then I walked back into it, right? Because what I gained in those 90 days was an understanding of how to handle situations that baffle me.
Mm,
So then I
yeah,
continued working from there.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Is there anything else that you want to throw out there, Soranie, before we?
Um, you know, listen, thank you so much for having me. If there's anyone out there who feels like they're struggling, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all the anonymouses are located everywhere in the world. If you have questions, just reach out, okay? You're wanted
Yes. And you matter.
and
You
you
really,
matter.
really matter. So yes, AA.org, CA.org, HA, I think it's HA.org. And then you can also you can reach me at the Sober Bartender on Facebook. And there is help there. And it does help. We're proof.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Proud of you, Brandon. Thank you
I'm
for
proud of
having me.
you too. All right.
Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.